Welcome, everyone. John Taylor is joining again today. I have my paper and pen ready. What's the topic you have for us today? It's always great
Um,
stuff. I love your content, thought
you know, I'm
provoking.
I'm astounded the way that my brain works on this. After every webinar that I do at this point, because I've been doing these for what,
You
7, 8
have,
years.
yes.
After every webinar the last little while, I'm like, I don't know if I can come up with something fresh. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if there's much else to be said. And that's not a comment on how totally I feel like I understand or taught it. That's how much I feel like I understand. But then throughout the week, throughout my work with couples in recovery, there's something that comes up that hits me that's, it's a turning of the gem, it's another perspective, it's a way we need to talk about it. So, we're going to talk about today what it looks like to use your relationship to compensate. I
Ooh.
think is a big pitfall. It's a natural tendency for couples early and individuals early in recovery versus using your relationship to grow, survive, and thrive. So I'll start with a couple of stories, a couple of illustrations. Between the ages of 15 and 18, I worked at a scout camp between Teton and Yellowstone National Parks, this beautiful, pristine, clear mountain lake. And my job for a couple years at the camp was to be a lifeguard. So I went through
Ooh.
lifeguard training. And this water, by the way, is the only place on the planet I've seen people jump off of a dock like this with 2 feet and come out of the water immediately with 2 feet like that. Probably not, but it's cold enough that like
Yeah.
that's the feel. So, we really spend a lot of focus and energy on, what to do with someone in the water who is panicking, because that can happen in a cold lake. It can happen when, you're up running around in the mountains with your buddies and you are not paying attention to whether or not you're a good swimmer. You just want to get in the water. So in lifeguard training, they tell you the last way to help somebody is to put yourself in the water and pull them out. So, you reach, you try to throw a ring buoy, you get in a boat and you row to them. And if option of last resort, you get in the water. They also made it very clear to us if someone is panicking and thrashing around, do not get close enough for them to grab because they will turn your body into a flotation device. It's better to wait until they go unconscious from not being able to breathe and then to grab them and pull them in than it is to try to get them out of the water fast. Um, so when we have a tendency to use our relationships to compensate, I think deep down in like 99% of cases, that's where it comes from as a panicked person who does not know what else to do. They are going to grab anything around them and not think too much about viability in the future. So I see this both with addicts and with partners. I'm talking about this not to hit anybody over the knuckle with a ruler because this is not a shame on you, don't do that. It's something for the two of you to think about, especially if um, the tension in your relationship continues to ratchet as you both are seeking recovery. Very rarely do I speak in terms of right and wrong, but I'll say if the tension continues to ratchet without an understanding of why, clear, jointly understood understanding of why, you're probably doing something wrong. Um, so when you apply that to a relationship, just that surface read of it, the someone's freaking out and someone can save this, which often is kind of how we see ourselves. It's interesting to me, both addict and partner can cast themselves in that role. I'm okay. We'll get through this. I just need you to calm down and, do what I tell you. When you apply that wisdom to a relationship, you have two people with a standoff saying, I'm calm, you calm down. And it becomes this trump card. Um, and if you really think that scenario through, it's more like the story Life of Pi. And
Oh.
I'll tell that briefly. There was a stunning movie they made about this book maybe 10 or 15 years ago. The book is wonderful, but it opens up with this Indian family who is relocating their zoo from India to somewhere else, and they're on a container ship. And the container ship capsizes at sea, and this boy, Paising, finds himself in a boat with, I think, an orangutan, a hyena, and a tiger. and this is his memory on the boat. And of course, chaos ensues. You have a couple prey animals, you have a predator. So it comes down to just Pi and the tiger on the boat. And much of the story early on is this navigation of tension for both of them. You can tell the tiger feels the tension too. And both Pising and the tiger start to realize that they are dependent on each other to survive. And so for early recovery, the book does not end. I won't spoil the ending exactly, but the book does not end with Pi and the tiger being famous friends and they go through life together. Um, in early recovery, it's not about becoming the best of friends and healing heart wounds and strengthening bonds. It's really about smart survival. From a relationship standpoint, it is smart survival for both of us. Now, I know that that is a easy thing to say. I know it's a hard thing to execute. So my goal today is maybe talking more about the signs that your relationship might be a cover or something that is used for compensation versus a relationship that we've oriented to help us to grow, a relationship that we've oriented to help us both survive these early days. So early on, immediately post-discovery, there's a huge tendency to use the relationship or demand that the relationship compensate for your fears, anxieties, and shortcomings. Now, there's almost a place for that early on. I've talked about this before, like the two roles that people have to accept when there's been infidelity. But it's not the relationship that compensates for the shortcomings or fears. It's the boundaries. It's the here's what I need from you in order for me to consider trusting you. It's the hard look in the mirror that the addicted person or the person who's betrayed or kept secrets does. Yeah, that's not good relationship fodder. If I continue to do that, I can guarantee that there will be no peace, no trust. Um, so it's it's not the relationship that does the compensating or the stabilizing. It's the individual who has committed treason and recognizes that, and it's the individual who has a right to banish, behead, so to speak. Don't do that literally, but banish the person who has betrayed. It's the realization that both of them have that this relationship is not a given going forward. As much as I may have a tendency to treat it in a certain way, whether through trauma or fear or whatever, ultimately, just like a pet, just like a child, just like another human being, we cannot mishandle or mistreat and expect there to be loyalty, love, and fidelity, and that goes for both. So a lot of the work that I do with couples early on, it challenges both around that, which I think is actually really important for stabilization and healing of trauma. I think in recovery circles, we credit this saying with Einstein. I don't know who actually said it, but if you're trying to solve a problem at the same level of thinking you had when it was created, you're not going to do it. So I think there's an imperative on both to elevate how we think about the relationship, to challenge. I feel like XYZ to you, and I'm probably justified in it, or I could find a reason to be justified. But thinking ahead, do we want to build a relationship that's based on how we feel in the moment? Or do we want to build a relationship that is based on survival, thriving, actually getting somewhere? So early on, we can see a lot of complaints and demands about criticism, safety, fairness. Why doesn't my partner just blank? At the best, these are early iterations of trying to right a relationship so it can float and we both don't drown. So I make a generous assumption there that once you hit the water and realize there is no big vessel to go back to, um, your instinct for what to do to survive may be directionally right, maybe big idea right, but the difference between getting into a boat safely versus panicked climbing into the boat and capsizing it and ruining the chance for all involved. It's a pretty fine line. So again, back to my scout camp days when I taught canoeing, that's one of the skills the kids had to learn is how to get back in a canoe after it capsized. And there's a different technique if it's an individual versus a couple people getting in, and that's, canoes are famously unstable. So it takes some thinking, it takes some coordination, it may even take a couple runs at looking for signs of trouble, looking for signs of instability. And instead of trying to force the stability that we yearn for, we're careful, we're deliberate about crafting that stability. Um, you have to know what you're oriented to. Now, this is not a call to just have these higher ideals. I think early on, if you don't want to fall into the trap of using your relationship to compensate, you have to be able to own things like, I'm so anxious. I'm so afraid. I've never done anything like this before. I don't know what the future is going to bring. I think even a hard but ultimately clarifying thing that I see couples do is when they can look at each other and say, I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of what might happen. I don't trust you fully. Now, that can be slung as an insult. It can also be this like heavy gravity realization, oh, we don't even have basic trust going here. Which just like if someone is in the ICU after a car accident, you wouldn't want the doctors to not pay attention to a regular heart rate, even though that news might be devastating. You'd want to know. You'd want someone to know. But when it comes to a relationship for couples in recovery, you're the only two people who can know and who it matters that you know. But part of my job as a couples therapist, when I watch couples early in recovery and I feed back to them, is I can gather all sorts of information about what's happening, what's not working. Part of my job as the therapist is kind of organize approaches where we can address that. But that information I have doesn't do any good for the couple unless they have the information, unless they can see it, unless they can feel it. And I'll actually replace the word can with willing to. Because
Mhm.
again, it gets really scary. In that book, Life of Pi, I put myself in that little Indian boy's character, and I would not want to wake up every day realizing that my partner on the boat is a wild tiger. Like, um, how terrifying! But waking up every day and realizing I'm on a boat with a tiger, crafted how he thought about getting through every day, how he strategized, um, what he did to ultimately turn a terrifying situation into one that was livable. It got them to dry land. Sorry, I ruined that part of the book. It's old. If it's spoiling it for you now, I'm sorry. You should have jumped on it sooner. Still a good book. So things like I know I messed up, but my partner dot dot dot, and will never look at. They're never helpful in the long run. So radical personal responsibility is one of the stabilizations. This is part of the how we grow in a relationship. I have yet to meet anybody who is emotionally mature enough to sustain the relationship they want at the moment they get into it. Because you may have done all the developing in the world that was possible for you, either as a single person or in a different relationship, and now you're in something new with someone new, and the challenges are different. And if it came to you easy what to do to overcome those challenges, you would have done it already. So there's a big challenge to look at our own faults, shortcomings. I'll put it in a maybe more inviting way to look at the responsibility that you bear for making this work or not work. I can't do that, or I don't know how, are some signs that you're probably going to use your relationship to cover inadequacies. I've talked about this before, whether it's true or not. I think the best way for help couples to hold shortcomings is if it's not happening, it's because I don't want to. Because the supposition has to be if it was important enough to me, I would figure out how to do it. And you look at that in your addiction, you look at that in your, scrappy perseverance and resiliency. There's a lot you figured out how to do. It didn't matter that you didn't know how. You just knew where you needed to go. You knew what you needed and you figured it out. And you can do that in your relationship too. So I think that mindset is really, really important. I'm not going to accept I don't know how. I'm not going to accept I can't. I will say I must not want to because I'm not figuring it out. I'm not getting closer. Um, I'm not willing to change, heal, examine, or willing to leave or let you go. This is not a stand for love. This is not a stand for hope. This is a sublimation of your own fears, your demons, and it's packing your relationship full of that uncertainty and distress that you don't want to feel. So for everybody involved in a relationship where there's been betrayal, everyone involved in D-Day, there's a whole lot of I don't know, I can't stay, I can't go, I can't do anything. And again, I want to validate that comes from a real place. It's very overwhelming. But if you don't want to end up in a relationship where you use and get used, you have to find a different narrative. You have to find a different way to think about that. I need to decide on what I'm willing to do if I choose to stay. I have to decide on what I need if I want this relationship to be viable in the future. And I have to put that forward, even though it's vulnerable, even though it's hard. Because without that personal responsibility from both parties, you don't get anything. Last week, I got to give a talk in a group much like this, a drop-in group hosted by a wonderful, talented therapist out of New York. And I talked about secure functioning and early recovery. And I'm noticing the more I talk about that topic, it's not an easy one for everybody to swallow. And I don't think that everyone should swallow it, by the way. So in this webinar, I'm talking and I'm kind of seeing some of the comments that are coming up. And I started to get really nervous because it seemed like most of the comments were, this can't happen for partners in early recovery. Addicts can't think this way in early recovery. This is not an early recovery intervention. And I think it's not an early recovery intervention for everybody. So if you are number one, completely uncertain, then you want a future, don't do what I'm saying to do here. If you are uncertain whether you want a future or whether you don't want a future, and you do not want to destroy the viability of any kind of future relationship, do what I'm saying to do here. So for some people, it is really clear, though it might be hard to say, I don't want to keep doing this. It wouldn't be good for me to keep doing this. And for other people, those conditions really are earnest. Hey, if I could trust you again, if I could see that you have a commitment to safety, if I could see that we're going to talk about problems rather than ignore them, I could really want this. I could think this is a great idea. So we put that on the table and move forward. So, um, again, if you want your relationship to be viable in the future, you have to start thinking quickly, or you have to start thinking differently quickly about your relationship. So if you find yourself feeling or thinking, my partner has to blank and I have no other, or I have no other options, you may not be coming from an empowered place. So, for example, a lot of addicts are early in recovery. If my partner could just get some empathy for me, stop being angry at me, stop hounding me, I could get some traction. It's not your partner's fault that you're not getting traction. Is that stuff distracting? Yeah, maybe. But again, if you want it bad enough, you'll figure out how to get it. And if your partner is not motivated to give you safety, or they're not giving you the safety or offering the safety that you would like, are you out of luck? Maybe for safety in the relationship, but safety in your life writ large, absolutely not. Part of the responsibility that you get to belly up to and you get to figure out. I actually think that's where the best boundaries come from. This will be happening in my life whether you want to participate or not. This condition must be met whether you want to participate or not. Here's what the road together looks like. Here's what the road for me, if I have to do this by myself, looks like. So I'm letting you know there's options that I'm considering. Um, get yourself fit for travel, and I would love to go in the direction of building that safety with you. Um, so you may not be coming from an adult place if you don't have that part of you that says, I need this and I can have it, whether I have participation or not. It's very understandable that folks get overridden by fear. If you find yourself constantly on edge and critical of your partner, and you're not looking at yourself, with all the love I have, you need to grow up a bit. And you need to look at what a functional adult can do that the child that might be activated in you cannot do. That's not about hating the child. Saying I've lived some years since I felt that helpless. And even if it's just a little, you know, maybe a 12 step example, I can turn to my higher power and I can put my trust in my higher power and I can pray. That's not something I had as a kid. Great. That's a step into functional adulthood. That's at least one option. Even in the happiest of relationships that I see, both parties are equally concerned with our impact with others and their impact on us. So this isn't this whole like focused on my own side of the street type of a thing is not just for people in crisis in relationships. It is a fundamental relationship skill. I'm not a passenger, I'm not a consumer, I'm not an employee, I'm a co-boss, a co-creator. We both are. Um, in my training with the Pact Institute, I forget the theorist that they quote a lot, but they quoted this idea that children who do not have their needs met as children will make society responsible for those needs in the future.
Mhm.
So that tendency to say, yeah, I could be great if you often comes from a deep place of wounding. Now, this is down the middle, I would say, for both partners and their addicted counterparts. Um, there is a part of us that, again, this is how we think differently quickly if we want a viable relationship for the future. Is I start thinking in terms of what part of the water do I carry, should I carry? Is how I'm showing up and behaving right now. Is that fair to my partner? Would I accept that from my partner with no hesitation? That question right now is my behavior fair? Are my asks fair? Is one of the best levelers, one of the best checks for am I in a relational headspace or not? So if I'm demanding that my partner, and either addict or betrayed partner can do this, am I demanding that my partner shut their mouth and only focus on themselves? If my partner were to say that to me, shut your mouth and only focus on yourself, how would I feel? Would I feel like that was fair? Would I feel like that was just? Or would I want there to be maybe a more liminal space? I say, listen, I know you have a lot of concerns. I know you have a lot of needs, and I want to help you. Right now, I have a very limited bandwidth. I have a very limited skill set. I'm trying to figure that out. I promise I'll keep it balanced as I go forward. As soon as I get something, I will give to you, I will give to me. I'm in this. Now, let's look at maybe how we can reconfigure our relationship so we can use it for growth. Harville Hendrix, who wrote, I think, Getting the Love You Want, talked about the bite fitting the wound, talking about, all the summation of our trauma from childhood. There's an opportunity in bonded relationships. The work you need to do to get stable is likely the same work that needs to happen to heal the trauma. So this idea of riding the ship together, looking at the secure functioning of the relationship together, I believe is a road for empowerment for both. With both addicts and their partners need that early on in recovery. Those are populations who don't tend to be known for their massive amounts of grounded empowerment. There's a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity, a lot of things that make a lot of sense when you understand where they came from. So we think in terms of as a team, what are we doing together? What's the problem we're facing? How are we going to face this? Again, think about Life of Pi, the boy in the boat with the tiger. There has to be a strategy that comes out of looking at things as they are, not glossing over problems. So first, recognize you're in the same foxhole. To quote the great Stan Tatkin, it's dumb to shoot the person that is in the foxhole with you. Now, just because it's dumb does not mean it's not completely understandable. Having an intense rage at someone that you are relying on sharing a foxhole with who is not doing their job is really, really understandable. But there's better ways to establish safety than to shoot the person you are sharing a foxhole with. So start thinking in terms of if I'm not ready to go to war in this foxhole where it's close quarters and all that, I've got to find a different way. I've got to find a different way to ensure that what I need, what I'm asking for, what I'm doing is given and received in a way that's helpful for the partner. So even if you intend to get out of the foxhole, some people know early on in discovery, I don't want to do this anymore. Even if you intend to get out of the foxhole, quit making your fear and your rage the price for someone else to pay. Tell them, be upfront with them. Don't want to do this anymore. Be fair with them. Here's what I can offer in ending this. Um, the truth is that nobody will follow through on what they owe you, even if justice says they owe this to you, unless they are committed to following through on it. So threats don't make a person do that, not for real. Leaving doesn't make a person do that, not for real. But real conversations, real, I would call them even declarations, not even conversations. When you did this, you ripped my heart out, and I don't know that I will ever feel whole again. I've never lived my life without my addiction. That scares me to death to think about moving forward and feeling my feelings. Um, End it right there. Because when you start giving instructions, often, especially in the heat of the moment, give instructions to each other when there's a, hey, we're in school, we're learning, let's plan, how are we doing this? But in the heat of the moment, giving instructions often creates a fight. What tends to be more impactful if you want to change somebody's mind is drop a heavy true load of what you feel, a heavy true load of truth, and let that sit, let that sink in. Second pointer, recognize that relationship struggles come out of immaturity. Now, that's not the genesis of all relationship struggles, but it's a really good place for individuals to start if you find yourself focused on your partner and their shortcomings. Oh, all struggles come out of a two-person immaturity. Okay, what am I doing here? Oftentimes, it's as simple as I'm mismanaging my partner. I know that that tone doesn't work with them. I know that that approach doesn't work with them. Let me back up. Let me try again. You can't grow your partner up to a point where you don't struggle with them anymore, any more than you can send them to the gym so that you can bulk up.
Mhm.
You get ability, you get resiliency because you get in the trenches and you do your work. It doesn't come from directing traffic for your partner. Second, know your limits, communicate them fairly. Maybe even make an agreement. Hey, we know we're both really, really flawed people. We know that this is not going to be easy. We're not expecting it. So it's actually an asset of ours when we can see problems, talk about problems, own problems, because they can be dealt with faster. They can be dealt with more efficiently. They can be dealt with more accurately if we're not trying to resist the fact that they exist. So communicate your limits fairly without threat. It's not good for me when XYZ happens. I'm going to be responding to things that hurt or hinder me in the following ways that show myself that I'm serious about not living this way anymore. Again, there's a relationship path to that, and there's a non-relationship path to that. And you can present that option to yourself, to your partner. This is how this would need to go if we want to do this together long term. We don't want to do this together long term. I'm headed in that direction anyway, but this is what it's going to look like. Know the roles, and I've talked about this in previous webinars. Know the roles that the person who's been betrayed, lied to, needs to inhabit. I call this the legitimate authority ruler. I think I've talked before. Think of a king and a queen. King commits treason, thrown in jail. Queen has an awful decision. Is it off with his head or a road to restoration? The queen in this scenario cannot be uncertain as she delivers her ruling. The king also can't walk into the court with any air of entitlement where he leaves the queen one choice. It's off with his head. So know those roles, know what's at stake, take your role seriously, grow into them. One of the most terrifying things I see for betrayed partners when their whole world has been rocked is to say, and another thing, thought a lot about it. I felt this. Here's what I need from you, or this is not a viable relationship for me. Here's what I need for you, or these are the changes that's going to come out of this. I'm deadly serious and I'm watching you. Um, or for someone who has lived a life uh, out of touch with their shame, avoiding at all costs, to fall on their knees and say, "I get it. You have a right to be done with me. I'm here only by your mercy. Don't want to squander that. I want to get this right. I'm working to get this right. Help me to understand how I'm falling short. Help me understand how that thing that I thought was going to work is not working. I'm all ears." So inhabit those roles. Don't be afraid of them. I think when I've talked about this before here, I've literally watched with couples. You do those roles for about a year, and there's a huge sea change. There's a huge sea change. There's trust that can come back. There's confidence that comes back. There's integrity that comes back, and then your relationship isn't about all about betrayal anymore. It starts to take shape in where we're headed. Make agreements that are good for both of you. We'll protect time for each other to do individual work. We'll work with competent therapists that each of us have confidence in their work. Um, Again, those agreements early on may not be about love and safety because that may be pretty far out of reach, but they can be about, think about that climbing into the canoe, two people climbing the canoe without tipping it over. Here's what I'm going to do on my end. I'm going to shift the balance in this way. I got you. I'll hold things steady. I'll be here. I'll lean the other way. Again, not because maybe we know we're going to end up forever, but because we don't want to be in the water anymore. We want to be somewhere stable. And then also the last thing that I would say is check-ins are really important. Not because I don't know that check-ins fix things, but I think check-ins are a ritual that shows our commitment to this. Okay, we're going to work to keep our relationship viable. So again, if the tiger could talk in the boat, the tiger would have told the boy, "I'm hungry. I need water." The boy would have told the tiger, "I need to sleep. I'm afraid you're going to kill me in my sleep. Like, I can get you water if you don't kill me in my sleep. I can get you food if you don't kill me in my sleep. Like, let's work together to make sure that this happens." So the check-ins on the status. Here's where I am in my work. Here's what's a struggle for me. Here's what I'm doing about it. Um, the check-ins are not to load your partner, either of you load your partner with responsibility for them. They may be an opportunity when you hear how your partner is struggling. You may have a genuine idea and a genuine inclination. I could do something about that. You've told me that you're in a bunch of fear about my acting out on my device at night. You know what? That's going to stay in the kitchen. I'll plug it in at night. I'll get an app that locks me out. They have these little, I don't know if you've ever seen the portable locking phone safes. Um, all sorts of things. Hey, I get that you're scared. I get this is on your mind all the time. It's really easy for me to take that threat off the table. So that's the material I have today. I see that we have some questions, but I do think it's really an important relationship inventory, a really important relationship question. Do we have this set up so that we're covering, so that we're trying to compensate or trying to get compensation out of what we don't do? Or have we realized that this relationship is an avenue for really good growth for both of us, really needed growth for both of us? And how are we going to set it up?
So I have a couple of comments. One is, I wonder how many people go into a relationship going like, this is going to be such a great opportunity for personal and relational growth.
No, I think most people, and I think it has to do with I don't know, movies about princesses and princes and things like that. I think most people go into a relationship with a consumer mentality.
Yeah.
which is what am I going to get from this, and is it going to make me happy? Which is one important part of the leg of the stool. Um, and it's not even like, I don't know, traumatized hurt people that go in. Like, we're just immature at the beginning of new relationships.
I also think this there's this person and they're your person, and we're going to make this life together. Like the naivete perhaps around that. But I was like, I don't know that I've gone into any relationships going like, yes, this is going to be good for my personal and relational growth. I mean, it's a whole different thing. And one more comment before we move to the questions, but like the stuff you're talking about with partners in particular, that's the way I was reading it. I could go either way, but like this is what I need for the relationship. This is where I'm headed, and you can be on the journey or not. Like I had a vision of a whole bunch of people going, "Oh, that's so scary," and like, but it's also really empowering if you are able to define this is where I'm going, and I want you on the journey or not. But
Well, not just empowering, but also defining. So I won't
yes,
go into detail here because this is not a therapy session, but my spouse and I are in the middle of a negotiation. She just finished a clinical degree. She's a therapist and working and things like that. And that means a shakeup in our relationship dynamic. And thank goodness for Marco Polo. It's one of my favorite ways to stay in contact. But we had a bunch of Marcos with each other yesterday where we said, this is hard for me to say, but I need you to know this is where I'm coming from. This is what I need. And there were several things she said yesterday that, I mean, they were pretty much like, I can't do that right now. That's not where my headspace is at. That's not what I feel like I need to focus on. And for me, seeing her plant a flag in the ground was redefining for me. I thought, okay, my expectation has been over here for a couple of years. And I realized that's all it was. It was an expectation. It was uncalibrated. It had nothing to do with reality. So when she says, I'm finding an edge in myself, I find myself saying, all right, like I actually have bandwidth to move towards that. And I would like to. So it's not just a matter of wresting control. If nobody is putting down a flag, if nobody is saying, here's what I know about myself, there's no leverage to define a relationship and figure out who we are.
no, that's really, and that's a great way to look at it too. Is like, because I was thinking, otherwise it's kind of like this whole floating thing of like we're directionless. We're floating
Yeah.
out in the ocean like the boat and pie. It's like we
Yeah.
don't even, we're just stuck. So, okay, we're gonna go to questions. My spouse didn't just cheat; he was awful in so many ways in different contexts. And I'm sorry, and unfortunately, that's often the case. Once he was caught and saw all the devastation and started working on himself, he looks back in disbelief. He says he didn't realize how awful he was and claims he just never even thought about how his actions impacted himself or anyone else. Not going to explain his upbringing, but the modeling was equally awful. Is it possible for someone to be that unaware of their behaviors and how awful they are?
I would say, yeah, I think it's possible, but I don't know that it's necessarily like in the realm of possibility that we should live with. So my oldest gets his driver's license in March, and he's very excited. And we had to do an hour of driver's ed with him with the No More Fatalities program here in Utah. So we got to watch heart-rending
Mm.
ads shows about texting and driving, impaired driving, and people's whose lives were changed forever. So that idea of like, I didn't know is not the same as an excuse, so it's okay. It's like with the car example, gosh, I've been texting behind the wheel and I didn't realize how dangerous that was. And now I'm looking at people whose lives were forever changed by that happening. And um, well, it is possible that a person didn't know. I think what you look for is when they're confronted with that, when they're given an opportunity to see it, what do they do? Do they play it off? Do they minimize? There's a commitment in themselves that says, I can never not see that again. I can't afford to. And I think that's one of the best things that can come out of that kind of softer, accountable space it opens up in recovery. That's what steps 4 and 8 and 9 are all about, is confronting the things that you didn't see or that were too painful to see or you didn't even think about. Well, now you do, and you need to, and it needs to change you.
Yeah, well, and even going back to your earlier information about like, I'm not going to do that, I can't do that, I won't do that, or whatever. That's that is unwillingness to move forward, and important data for the partner as well. So, okay, what do you suggest for a couple that is staying together? The betrayer is making me feel safe. So this is the betrayed partner. I assume I see the actions work and change. Exclamation point. I just feel like I cannot trust him. Not so much can't, but will not. That doesn't mean I don't trust him to do everything, but there are some things I will never trust him to do again. Also feel like some things in me have shut down or off that makes sense, and I will never be capable of really feeling deeply for him again.
Um, I really appreciate that vulnerability in there. And the first thing that I would say is um, the mechanism for trust is more choice than should I, and especially after betrayal. I think there has to be an acceptance, not in a like there has to be, but more like if you're going to trust again, there has to be an acceptance that the history is not spotless, that you're doing something very vulnerable. You're doing something that has inherent risk. Now, if the person who's betrayed you is doing things right, they're working to make that risk smaller and smaller and smaller for you. So that that decision to trust, should you ever want to make it, is not this like it killed me to make that decision and now I'm a shell of a person. I don't feel anything. So ultimately trust comes from a gut feeling. I think I've shared this example before. A year ago, we were potty training my now 4-year-old and 3-year-old. And I realized after about a day and a half, it didn't take long. They did not think the reminders to go to the bathroom and the prizes for going and trying were fun anymore. And my daughter literally said, Dad, leave me alone. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I realized in that moment that trust isn't just, I think this is going to go well. Sometimes trust is also a recognition that there are certain relationships and certain things that will not work if there's not an ability to trust. Now, in this case, I would say, look at those things that you say, there's things that I don't think I'll ever trust him to do again. Have you written that list out? You know what it is? Could you speak that and say, given the circumstances, I know the following things, probably not, like I'm not planning for them to work again, and I need you to know that. One of the things that a lot of people who have been betrayed or abused need is a high level of choice and intentionality in their life in order to feel safe. And that's okay. That's not wrong. That's not bad. But again, have you staked your claim in that? You said this is how it feels. And also that part of this sense of I will never be capable of really feeling deeply for him again. Sometimes it's a knowledge. I won't let my heart go there again. And sometimes it's I couldn't imagine my heart going there again, and I'll just have to take it a day at a time. So the thing that I like about this is when there's a real focus on here's what's going on in my internal process, and that's not something that gums up the process of trust. That's some of the really hard work in trust is I really have to examine what am I willing to extend? How much vulnerability am I willing to put on here? And knowing that that doesn't come from a place of I have all these assurances. It comes from I've got a gut feeling that this is what I want to do. It's really hard.
And I'm like, I hear that I may never, and you may not be able to. And one of the things that came to mind for me was, if you are vulnerable and choose to, at some point, if you ever feel ready to, trust him and he betrays your trust, like, I'm thinking, I'm not going to get this right, John, but it isn't on you, like you were willing, and we're fallible humans. And so but but could you see a place where, and again, no, I'm not, there's zero pressure, but that whole never, I was a lot into always and nevers and forevers, and that was, and I started doing a lot more. There's a lot more gray area of like, could I imagine that? And if the absolute worst happened and he betrayed you again, you know, could you not just survive that, but could you, tolerate that and recognize that that's on him not taking care of himself? And addiction, we are very broken, people, and we have a lot of work to do. And I love the kintsugi. I say that wrong. Art, the Japanese art, and I use this analogy often because I look at those pieces of art and all of it is broken pottery that is mended together with gold glue, and I mean it's stunningly beautiful. We can be beautiful in our brokenness, and so I hold that art up as like a visual of like what could be if I'm willing to, start working on putting the broken pieces together. It's not for everybody. There's a lot of people, just like John was talking about, that are going like, "Yep, I'm too afraid to ever try," and all of those things. And zero judgment. It's like just recognizing where you are. But for you right now, this is where you're at. But you don't know, I mean, and if he continues to work and you're continuing to understand how much strength you really have and choices, maybe, but you get to choose all of that. Okay, this one's a two-parter. I find it tough to let my husband go out. He does go places, and for example, to the gym. I can't control who he stares at, but when conversations should, oh, but what conversation should we have before he goes in public? He wants to go to a dinner tonight with students he's in a class with, debating if I want him to. We have a toddler. He's in recovery randomly, but not consistently. And wanted to add, I'm also in a state where we've never been to before and not familiar with this area. We had to travel and moving to a new state soon nearby. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I can't remember the specifics, but in a recent session with a couple I was working with, something like this came up in that the partner who had been betrayed said to their partner, I'm not worried about your sobriety when you travel. That's not where my brain is at. It's a specific location. Now the details are coming back to this specific location. It said it's not your sobriety status. It's not anything. It's I don't have bandwidth to acknowledge, to think about you in that place. Travel anywhere else your job takes you, but I can't do that. And I was so proud of this partner in that session because I know they've had years of arguments about why do you have to control? Like, I'm staying
Mhm.
here. You know that I'm working a plan. Again, it was that radical responsibility. This isn't about what you're doing or what you're not doing. I'm not in a state where I can handle that bandwidth. And I think that that's an okay place for a boundary to come from. Your boundaries do not have to come from, I know that you're not safe and I know you're not going to be sober and I know you're not going to stare. It's knowing that you're out there and my brain going to what could happen. I'm not in a place where I don't think I wouldn't do that all night. And it would take a big toll out of me. Or it could be, in general, that's usually not something that I think feels great, but I've got bandwidth for it tonight. So go. I hope you stay sober. Remember you're married. Don't do anything to hurt me. So again, it's that coming from the place of what I know I can and can't do. And you don't have to justify that through, I don't want you to do this because it's a bad idea for you. It can be my brain is a nightmare landscape sometimes, and I'm really close to that right now. I don't have a lot of bandwidth to think about you out with people that I don't know in a place that I'm not familiar with. I hope you'll understand.
Yeah, I love that answer. And here's some things for you. There's a bunch of resources for you, regardless of what he does or doesn't do tonight. But the podcasts and live previously recorded webinars, including a lot more by John, but lots of other resources. So those, could be something for you to hold on to. Okay, so the next question. Can you clarify what you mean by compensate when you talked about is your relationship compensating?
Yeah, so I'll put it this way: compensate versus collaborate. It is okay for people able to have different strengths, different expertises. Our differences are our superpower. Compensate is I'm not going to take ownership for what doesn't work for me. I'm not going to take ownership for the fact that I make withdrawals from this relationship because we all do. So compensation is it's an entitlement. Well, this shouldn't be a problem if you only would XYZ versus hey, I know this is a problem. I know it's not something that I'm good at. I know that puts an extra load on you. And we kind of like we're both looking out for that kind of stuff and recognizing that we work as a team from different strengths. So compensation is avoiding looking at ourselves and owning who we are and what we do well and what we don't and expecting that things should go well anyway. I hope that clarifies.
So the next one is I find my partner's behavior highly confusing as over text he can show up vulnerable and reflective, but in person he won't even say hi to the kids. And when we get home, he often uses his newly discovered autism as an excuse. How do I reconcile this cute, confusing behavior? My nervous system believes in person actions and dialogue more than text. Text also was his primary method of acting out. So this is triggering at that level, and I receive it as him hiding behind it, and it feels controlling versus connecting.
Oh, geez. I will do my
Yeah,
best to answer this. This is a question for Candace Christiansen.
yeah.
The intersection of neurodiversity and addiction can be really tough. So first, just looking at neurobiologically, and this isn't even a neurotypical, non-neurotypical thing, but neurobiologically, think of how many data points you have to manage when you're texting with someone versus when you can see their face, you can hear them breathing, you can see color in their skin, like all of this stuff that we pick up without realizing. Um, there's a lot of people who I think get more honest over text. There's a lot of people who get more open over text because there's not the immediate consequence of who's right there. And to your point about like he acted out this way, I can understand why that would be triggering. You're not actually thinking about the person receiving this message, and that's why you do what you do. Um, so all that to say, just because it might be easier for someone, to your point here, that doesn't mean it has to be satisfying for you. So again, when we talk about knowing limits, just because there's a limit does not mean it's necessarily a no-go. I think that's an immature stance, actually, to say to your partner, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, whether it's some kind of skin sensitivity or a preference for smell, to say, I could never, ever, and I won't because it's hard for me. I don't think that's real great for a relationship to say, I know, I know that I don't naturally think or produce or show up in the way that you want. I want to work on that. But this is where I worry about that popular psychology idea of love language. By the way, is what the research points to on that is well, we all speak all of them. And we may have a
Mm.
preference. It's not a matter of ability. So that idea of I want what I want, and if you don't provide it for me, you're not a good partner, can have some validity, but it can also have some entitlement with it. So the ability to talk when you don't acknowledge me or the kids when you walk in the door, that hurts a lot. Now, I work with a lot of neurodiverse people in couples, and what I do know neurodiverse people can do, they can do a 2 minute ritual at the door where there's a hug, a high five, a kiss, a look in your eyes. Hey, I'm so glad you're home. How was your day? It's good to see you. People can do that. And that kind of like launching, landing ritual stuff, it actually goes a really long way in leveling out nervous systems. So when there's neurodiversity with addiction and relationships, I think the key to remember is solutions are often a little less straightforward and it takes a little more creativity and a few more whacks at the tree before you kind of figure out exactly what to do. But I would say a lot, if not all, people are capable of building a relationship conjointly that does security and does safety if they realize what's at stake and they do the work. There's a lot of neurodiverse folks who hold down jobs and do a very good job at them because they realize there's things I can do and there's things I can't do. There's things that work and things that don't work here. Relationships are no different. in that way. There's parameters. We are accountable. Um, Dan Tatkin says it this way: one of the mistakes couples make about their marriage is they assume that they're family, and family means that you can take off your pants and walk around the house however you want. Marriages have to be better than family in that way. We're actually striving for not just I can be and do whatever I want. We're striving for let's build something that's really great for both of us.
And this feels like couples therapy on this and
Yeah.
group, like him
Yeah.
being in group with, 12-step groups or group, whatever, but that interaction and learning to say things that could be more difficult. Okay, we have like 2 minutes. My husband's grandfather, dad, and uncle all cheated on their spouses. Their wives brushed the betrayals under the rug, and they have suggested I forgive and forget, happening or forgetting not happening. How much do you think growing up with these behaviors modeled and no consequences for behavior influence children and contribute to future generations for infidelity?
It's huge. Like we don't even realize there's that old story about the old fish that swims by the two young fish. And the old fish says to the young fish, "Hey, how's the water?" And the two young fish turn to each other and say, "What's water?" Like
Mm.
we don't realize what the culture around us puts in us. And there's a huge tendency in human beings to think that like what I grew up feeling normal about or what was normalized to me is normal for everybody. So I think there's a huge contribution to why I think the way I did, why I did what I did. And until there's a confrontation with like, hey, that's not the reality. Sure, you grew up in that and things work that way, but it doesn't work that way for me. It's not going to work that way for me. So you have a choice. Do what you've always been doing, or if you want to be in a relationship with me, you got to figure out how to do what works for me. This has not been a good deal.
Yeah, Dr. Rob's Out of the Doghouse book, but the work group is excellent about that. It's like you can continue to do that, but not if you want to stay in the relationship with your partner,
Yeah,
because that yeah, so and I love what John said about just because that's how you were raised doesn't mean it has to keep going for generation. I mean, with addiction, it can be generations.
yeah,
Somebody stops this, like I'm going to take the initiative and I'm going to stop doing this so that the next generations have something different modeled. So
yeah.
we are out of time. Thanks, John. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
bye.